Hello and welcome to TMI with Aldous Tyler for Friday, March 19th, 2021. You know, I don't know about you, but it's Friday, and that reminds me that the weekend is upon us. 5 p.m. on a Friday, of course. You're going to want to go ahead and get out there and enjoy the weekend. But something about weekends. A lot of people don't realize this. They virtually didn't exist about 100 years ago. And why is that? Well, while the churches, of course, wanted you to come in on Sunday, other than that, there really wasn't a designated time for your average working person to say, hey, I should have some time off to spend with my friends, my family, to do things. Same thing with, frankly, health coverage. That really wasn't a thing. 100 years ago, you went to the doctor and you paid for it. That was all there was to it. But there's something that really came to prominence about a century ago and continues to be important to this day, although heavily embattled, and that is the union. You see, the idea of having a weekend, the idea of a 40-hour work week or healthcare coverage, those were all brought together by years of negotiations that unions put forward to try to make sure that people working for the companies they represented or that they were part of actually had time to enjoy their lives as well as work. But you know what? I'm not the only one who feels this way. Faiz Shakir, campaign manager for Bernie Sanders back in 2020 has put together a project called A More Perfect Union that you can find at perfectunion.us, and he's joining us right now here on TMI. Faiz, welcome to TMI.
Hi, Aldous. Thanks for having me.
Well, absolutely glad to have you here. So as I was saying, one of the things that people don't realize is exactly how much unions have done for everybody.
Yes, and that unions unfortunately are under attack and have been for decades. I mean, we obviously had a president, FDR, who believed in unions. We had expansions of unions for quite a while, and then there's been a concerted attack on them for decades. You've experienced it there firsthand in Wisconsin.
Oh, yes.
And we have had to overcome a number of obstacles. And thankfully, we now have a president of the United States who is a firm believer in unions, coupled with the fact that the political makeup has now changed and created perhaps the most positive pro-union environment that we could have for policymaking in decades. And that's couldn't come at a better time, all this because of the immense amount of corporate power that we have to rein in and drive accountability for. And ultimately, as you were mentioning in your lead-in, we need dignity of work, just treating people with basic common decency, which sadly is hard to come by these days.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in a capitalist structure like we have right now, what simply happens is that for your time, you're going to be paid, whatever it is. And so your time is, according to whatever you've managed to negotiate, worth X amount, say per hour or per week or per year. And honestly, I personally am always a bit of the opinion that everyone's time should be considered worth, as much as everybody else's. We all only live a certain amount of time on the planet. But given that we have to negotiate it out, why not negotiate from strength, which is what the union allows you to do?
And strength in numbers. And that's the big important element of why a union, because we inherently know and understand that when you're taking on large businesses with a lot of capital in a capitalist society, that the way to kind of even that ledger, to speak on behalf of that worker who is getting paid an hourly wage and doesn't have the commensurate economic clout that his bosses or managers do, or the political clout that his bosses and managers do, his or her bosses, that the best way to try to even the playing field is to have power in numbers. And that is what a union provides, is collective solidarity. All this, we'll get into it a little bit, but there are fights all across this country, courageous people who are standing up like never before, quite frankly. There's a wildfire going on out there, a positive wildfire of people saying, I've had enough, I'm sick of it. And I think it's important that we tell their stories.
Well, and one of the things that has come to light, it's kind of funny. So the pandemic that we've experienced now for the past year has really brought to focus a number of things that I'm not even sure I would have expected it to, but not the least of which is exactly the frustrations that workers have with the situations they're in. The workers that are unable to count on being paid for the fact that they're out there exposing themselves to a potentially deadly virus. Workers who need to be able to stay protected but still stay working while at home, for example. All of these things have pushed to the forefront, in my opinion, at the very least, the need to be able to collectively bargain so that these needs can be met, not just for a pandemic, but just in life in general.
Yeah, and as you say that, all those three examples came straight to my head. And one of them you may know even better than I do. There in Madison, there's a fight among the nurses at that Meriter Hospital who've been saying, "Hey, we are exhausted. We have been dealing with COVID patients, and all we want is some sick leave. Can we? I mean, well, many of them have exhausted sick leave, and they're just asking for sick leave that that they're getting rebuffed, and that is why you have a union. This you fight for basic essentials. Frontline heroes should be treated like heroes that they are. Across the country in Seattle, you have Kroger employees who have been fighting for hazard pay, not only in Seattle but in Los Angeles and in Long Beach. Those because Kroger would not extend hazard pay, those cities ended up saying, "Hey, we're going to make you pay hazard pay." And Kroger responds by saying, "We'll shut down the stores." How about that? Think about Kroger being one of the wealthiest grocery chains right now, reaping literally billions of dollars in profit, not operating expenses, profit. And they're saying, "No, we'll just shut down the store. To hell with you." And then, of course, down south in Alabama, you'd have probably some courageous workers who are organized right now, an active union, saying, "We've been on the front lines. This warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, has only existed during the period of COVID. It literally started, this is last March. It existed in the period of COVID. They have been really put through very difficult working conditions. Obviously, with Amazon, power and operating." Going through the roof during COVID, these workers are asked to touch a box every 8 seconds. If they don't do so, they are fired. There's a robot monitoring every one of their movements. They're just asking for decent working conditions, to be treated like a human, not like a robot. And so all across the country, you see, as you mentioned, COVID exposing the inequities in our system. But thankfully, hopefully, workers stepping out courageously and saying, "I'm going to demand the dignity I deserve."
Thank you very much. We are speaking to Faiz Shakir, currently with perfectunion.us for More Perfect Union Project. And when you were on the campaign trail last year, 2020, did you run across, I would assume at least, workers who were very interested in how they could possibly put together a stronger structure for unions?
Yeah, all the time, everywhere you went. And obviously, now we live in an environment where unionization among the workforce is at the lowest levels in American history. We're out, somewhere in the neighborhood of 6%, which is of the workforce, which is just sad. And so you unfortunately have now a generation of people who haven't had the experience of even being in a union, knowing how to form a union, how that process goes. So a lot of what we need to do is just basic education. The positive side of this, though, is if you look at the younger generation, people at the age of 25 and under, they are fired up about unions. You see this on campuses all across America. You see this on grad students across America. There's just a hyper awareness that there is power in unionization. And I think, it's old school. Unions are old school, but they're making a comeback. They are the hip new thing, as they should be. And people are, I think, wanting to explore how best to do it. And it's a moment for all of the great unions across America to rise to this challenge, to do the basic education with the workforce, with new workers, and explain why they should join that.
Makes sense. After all, when so many people talk about the quote unquote good old days, some of the younger folks realize that, you know what, this isn't necessarily code for, wanting things that used to be more racially conservative, that there actually are financial benefits to how things used to be run. So a little exploration, and suddenly they find, hey, these union things might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and especially when you look at the evolving workforce and you see a lot of these quote unquote gig workers, Uber, DoorDash, Grubhub, companies like that, Amazon, of course, trying to hire people as contractors rather than to pay them a salary and give them the commensurate health benefits that would come with a full-time job. Yeah, obviously, pensions have almost evaporated from many of the workplaces now. So just some of those basic benefits packages were better, decades ago. And so we're fighting, in some sense, to just reclaim what workers had. And I think, thankfully, that there's a new generation of young people, I think, who are going to lead a revitalization of the solidarity movements of your.
I have to say, Fez, first of all, allow me to pause for a sip of the coffee. And speaking of that, let's talk Collectivo. I believe we have a movement that is forming between Chicago, Madison, and Milwaukee, the three cities you will find Collectivo coffee in that I'm aware of, that is part of what you're working on right now. Is that correct?
That's right. Some of those workers have reached out to us and told us their stories. This is a historic Collectivo coffee. If they form a union, as they are now in the process of trying to do, an active ongoing union election, it concludes on March 30th. If they succeed, it will be the largest, essentially, coffee house or cafe in America, a unionized cafe in America. So it's a big deal. And what are they fighting over? Like, why? Why do you want to organize the baristas, the back of the house folks? What's the argument? Well, it is that essentially they're being paid disparate wages. So if you're depending on where you work, and whether it's Wisconsin or Illinois, you get very different wages for doing the exact same work. And now, mind you, you're paying essentially the same amount for the coffee in both places too. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think these workers understand that they want to be treated with some degree, equity in this situation. The other piece of it is, obviously, during COVID, people are asking for just safety precautions, and it's up to the employer to make sure that their employees are taken care of. And often, a lot of them want to skimp on doing that because they want to spend the money on it. So they'll say, "Oh, we're taking care of the customers, but we don't need to take care of the employees." And so it is up to the employees to fight for some of those basic safety precautions that they deserve if they're going to go in and serve people. And obviously, those folks that collect Collectivo and all across America are facing the same hurdles. And whether you're down in Amazon's warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, or else, when you try to fight for your right to unionize, you know what you get? You get an assault of a union busting effort to try to break it up, and a lot of propaganda forced your way. Collectivo, like many other large corporations, has decided to hire union busters to come in and put people through a bunch of propaganda, force nonsense down their throat, and drive them into a place of fear and say, "Don't unionize," based on misinformation.
So let's do one thing as a favor to anybody who has ever been interested in forming a union. Let's really quickly run through some of the common tactics union busters use so they know what they're up against. For example, don't they often have some really slickly done presentations that they pretty much are, the company will then force all of its employees to go watch?
So one of the first things that an employer who wants to bust up a potential union will try to do is they'll search for a third party organization that does this as a profession, and there are a lot of them. And in Collectivo's case, they reached out to one of the more prominent companies that does this, called the Labor Relations Institute. And they say, "Hey, Labor Relations Institute, we'll pay you $3,000 a day," and you can actually find how much they pay these folks, because you can online at the Labor Department website, you'll find they're paying $375 an hour. Calculate that out, 8 hours a day, right? There's $3,000 plus they're paid the traveling expenses for these people flying in from California to do this. So what are they going to do? What are these Labor Relations Institute folks going to do? Well, they're going to force you into a large theater with all of your coworkers, and they're going to put up presentations, slick presentations, videos, telling you, fill your head with a lot of misinformation. "Oh, your wages will go down. Oh, it'll be terrible. The unions, they're going to go spend it on building mansions for themselves," or something like that. They're going to try to proselytize about, don't go down this road. And you think about it, why are they making such efforts? Why is Amazon, why is Collective, why are these companies spending so much more when they couldn't just give, a couple of dollars more to an hour to the worker and resolve some of the labor concerns? No, instead they're going to fight it. Where are they fighting it? They're scared of the possibility that workers would have a voice in the business. And that's what they're fighting against. And that's what obviously workers deserve, is to have a seat at the table in the course of the business.
Absolutely. So again, we're speaking to Faiz Shakir, who, again, last year was with the Bernie Sanders campaign, helped run the thing, I believe, and this year has put not only that experience, but so much of his other life experience together to try to help unions, frankly, restore where they've been in society. Because again, the prominence of unions is why we have weekends. It's why we have healthcare. It being something that should be a thing according to the national standard. So many things, so many benefits to society in general came because unions got together and collectively fought for them. And Fez, one of the things that I personally have always felt about unions is that one of the reasons why they are so hard fought against is because without them, it's a lot easier for those with the billions of dollars to water down the standards, to basically make it so that even if you're not at a union shop, they can slowly go ahead and say, oh, well, we're not going to do this. It's a little bit too much expensive. You guys understand.
Yeah, and there's this skepticism that exists not only of government but also of unions, that there's a bureaucratic organizations. What are they going to do anyway? And the sad thing about that is that they're doing, even when you do all of the wonderful things to improve people's lives, people have the benefits but don't always know where they come from, right? So to your point, you led with this in your show, which is, how do we have five-day work week? How do we have 40-hour work week? How do we have weekends off, or no child labor, or healthcare coverage? Where does those things come from? And I think in many ways, workers have received benefits that we don't always know where they came from. And so it's easy to kind of castigate a union and say, oh, that one individual you don't like here or there, they take some of your paycheck. You just why don't you get all of it, without appreciating that the collective lifting up the boats is what's occurring. Because of collective solidarity, you have the ability to fight for better pay packages and just generally better conditions at your workplace. And you see the difference, quite frankly. You see it, look at Amazon. They don't have a union, right? And I was mentioning, up in Kroger, those folks do have a union. They're with UFCW. And because they're with UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers, they're able to exert impact and power in this situation. They can strike. They can change their working conditions. They can leverage something over Kroger that makes them concerned. Whereas those folks down in Alabama were fighting for a union, they don't have a union representative to fight for them at the table. So they get the terms dictated to them, and they're told to take it or leave it. And that, of course, in this day and age, where corporations have so much power, if you get to take it or leave it off from a corporation, you know how that's going to be written? Not well. They're going to use and abuse you. They're going to say, oh, we're going to schedule you in any time that we want. And we don't care about your work-life balance. We don't care that you have to go raise kids. We don't care if you need an increase in wage. We don't care if you need better health benefits or paid sick leave. Not our problem. If you don't want this job, fine, we'll find somebody else to take it. Good luck to you. And that kind of downward slide, the cycle, has been existing for decades, such that it's gotten to a place where workers really have so little to lose at this juncture that they were fighting and say, okay, great. And if you threaten to shut down your plant, go ahead and shut down a plant. I think it's worth kind of collectively bargaining to make sure that we have a seat at this table. And sure enough, if they do that, if workers across America do that, it is going to, I think, create positive benefits for everybody in the workforce. Literally everybody will benefit.
I agree. So one of the things that always kind of got me that people don't understand about unions, the thing that unions allow to have happen is it allows those of us who aren't the billionaires, those of us who aren't the capitalists that actually own all of these companies, it allows us to do what they have been doing for a long time. Billionaires and the other capitalists out there will essentially collectively decide that they don't want us, who perform the work that they make their money from, to be able to get together and go ahead and demand that we are treated, as you said, with more dignity, that we are actually paid a living wage, that we are cared for in ways that will wind up impacting their bottom line. So they get together and they're very much along the lines of saying, "Hey, look, we can't have Amazon form a union because Walmart's over here going, wow, if Amazon forms a union, what's going to stop our people from saying, hey, look, company as big as Amazon just did it, let's do it." So they are very much together on this. The people who don't want unions, though, those who, of course, like I said, run the companies, I should say, that too. They don't want people who are not the capitalists, that would be us, the workers. They don't want us to go ahead and actually collectively bargain. That's bad for their bottom line, they think.
And you mentioned the billionaires in this country who've been making out like robber barons during this COVID package, complete COVID profiteers, seeing their wealth double, triple, quadruple, and maybe even more than that. And you're right that when they are looking at, sustaining it, they're driven just by greed. I mean, they all want to be known as the richest person in the world, and that's all they care about. And you have, I think the other benefit that isn't often understood about unions is if you let these billionaires and their corporate executives drive the train completely on their own, you are not going to have a lot of information or awareness about the decisions that they are making and the alternative options that they could have gone down. And what happens with a unionized workforce is you get a chance to get inside those books and say, hey, what's the compensation package for all of these workers? What are the healthcare packages here? How are they compared to the folks over there or at your other locations? Or by the way, when you have established locations overseas in Germany or the UK, how are we treated as compared to those folks? And what ends up happening is you have a better chance to negotiate for some basic dignity and equity. And if you don't fight for that, what happens, of course, is that they will take advantage of, like they'll hide information from you. They won't disclose it. And I think that's one of the pieces often overlooked about it, having union representation, as you can at least have the kind of expertise of diving into those corporate books, getting a better sense of comparative scales and packages, and fighting, having a decent shot at the fight to increase your benefits, your pay.
Knowledge is power, Mr. Shakir, and that's one of the big things that the union allows you to do is to actually have the knowledge, not only of what the operations might be like elsewhere, which is important, but also to get an idea of, okay, so the CEO just got a tremendous raise. Our company's doing okay, so I see that, but how come that didn't trickle down here? How come we didn't see it on the front line? Why did the coffee bean grinder not get it if the executive did? Things like that, which of course you're never going to find out if you're not in the union. The executives won't tell you that.
And in this day and age, that like all they care about is that their next quarterly earnings, right, report. They want to show, that we are cutting costs and increasing revenue. That's it. They want to show it to their shareholders so that some of the large investors will just invest in their company. And it's such a short-term philosophy, right, in their heads is see the stock rise. Of course, when the stocks rise, the stock values rise, it tends to benefit the wealthiest in our society. People who have like literally millions and millions of dollars of stock, you see a 5% rise for them. Hey, guess what? That's a lot of money for them. And what we have to do is fight against that notion that all we care about is its stock price or how the Dow Jones is doing, how NASDAQ is doing. We got to think beyond that with a different metric, a different sense. How are workers doing in their lives? How are we doing right by them? And I think changing that philosophy is really critical, and seeing the companies think more about, could we be doing better to retain a workforce, treat that workforce well, keep them motivated, excited, energized. Those things are not really appreciated in the American workforce as much as they are even when you look internationally. Many of those companies think that way. They've been compelled and forced to do so by governments that are much more engaged in this than America, which has far more lax regulation. So, we have to change the power imbalance that exists in American society between corporate management and the workers who drive productivity in America.
Absolutely. Again, we're talking to Faiz Shakir. Again, you can find the More Perfect Union project that he's working on at perfectunion.us. I would encourage you to do so. But the thing that I wanted to also bring out is one of the main things that I think is helping to drive some of the, frankly, across the aisle interest when it comes to Republican workers, Democratic voting workers, and frankly, independent voting workers. All of us are getting more interested in unions. And I think one of the things that is doing that is that there is one way that the wealthy CEOs and such are letting us know just how much more they're making. And it's because it's become fashionable to brag about it.
And it is a sign of their own power and influence, right? That people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates like to how wealthy. I mean, it's a metric. I mean, I understand it. It's like a Michael Jordan philosophy, right? And Michael Jordan was driven to anytime he stepped on the court to be the greatest there, right? And but these folks, they just want to be the greatest billionaire that ever existed. That's it. But guess what? Being the greatest billionaire comes with great costs to society and to their workers. Whenever you see that amount of wealth being accumulated in just a few number of individuals, that's a dysfunctional society. Obviously, my boss, Bernie Sanders, has talked about this at great length, and it's a plutocracy, it's an oligarchy. When you have that much, not only wealth accumulated, but with wealth also that comes power. And you see in Amazon, we've been covering Amazon all this, and it's amazing that some of the things that they're able to do because they have such wealth and power. One example is they were able to change the traffic light patterns outside of their warehouse. They literally called the county and said, change the traffic lights. Why did they want to do that? Because some of the union organizers were sitting right there at the lights. So when the cars stopped, they would try to have conversations with the workers about joining a union. So, Amazon said, hey, what if we just make the light green all the time? Call the county, change the traffic light. Here's another example. When they're in the midst of a union election, right? And they asked the NLRB, Amazon did, can we put a drop box here on site for people to deliver their ballots? Because they wanted to monitor how many people would be delivering their ballots. And the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, said, no, that would be intimidation. So guess what Amazon was able to do with their power? They call up the United States Postal Service and say, why don't you put a post office box right here on our property and make the workers have to drop in their ballots right here? And the Postal Service said, sure, because Amazon owns the Postal Service, not the other way around. I mean, it's a crazy situation, all this. And it's going to just continue to get way more out of whack. Unless and until, the government fights and retains, what is its proper role of responsibility to regulate and oversee and hold these corporations accountable. And that's why I'm pleased that at least Joe Biden has spoken out on this matter and said he stands with the workers who are organizing in Alabama. And obviously, if it were to happen and succeed, it would be, I think, a momentous event that will inspire lots of other people around the country to similarly want to unionize.
Understood. Faiz Shakir, thank you so much for your efforts with More Perfect Union. Again, that's at perfectunion.us. I want everybody to remember, it's nothing short of simply making sure you're getting some value for the amount of life you're spending working when you join together with other workers to collectively bargain for your money, for your benefits, all of that. Remember, every dollar that every billionaire possesses, every dollar's worth of value was created by a worker. Faiz, thanks for coming by. I really appreciate it. All right, you've been listening to TMI with Aldous Tyler.